when conditions aren't great, that's the time to try something different. Thanks for joining me again, everyone. Landscape photography can be tremendously rewarding. When it all comes together, when you get those beautiful conditions and you get the composition just right, and you just know before you even touch the shutter release button, you know you've got something special. It's a fantastic feeling, exhilarating sometimes. But here's the thing, those perfect conditions don't come around that often. In fact, a lot of the time you're just getting kind of okay conditions, or conditions that aren't very good at all. When you get those conditions that really aren't great at all, landscape photography can actually be really frustrating and disappointing. And I think it's important that people like me who make these videos, these vlogs about sharing our explorations and our photography, I think it's important that we show that it's not always the exhilaration and the reward. Sometimes it's the disappointment and the frustration, because otherwise those people that are just starting out and that are going out, they're going to think that it's always great all the time, and it's not. Sometimes it's not great. Sometimes you have to work with conditions that really aren't what you want at all. Now, in my last video, if you watched that, you may have noticed that my frustration was creeping through a little bit. Certainly the blue skies that we're dealing with here at the moment, and that I'm probably going to be dealing with for a few more weeks, they're making life really hard for me in terms of actually getting really nice shots. I'm still coming out. I'm still trying to find images that will work with the conditions that I've got. And it's important to do that, because if I can get a nice image, if I can find a composition, if my skills are good enough to find something that works when the conditions aren't good, when the conditions are really bad actually, then what can I do when the conditions are really good, when I get those perfect conditions? So it's a good way to hone skills, and it's also a good way to practice things, to try out compositions that you perhaps wouldn't try otherwise, because otherwise you might be afraid that you're going to miss a real opportunity, whereas when conditions aren't great, that's the time to try something different. So that's what I'm doing today. I've been for quite a long hike around on the mountains looking for some scenes, and I've actually come to a spot which is hopefully going to give me something a little bit different. So I'll talk you through what I'm doing in a second. So I've got 70-200 lens on, and I'm all the way out at 200mm. I've got a portrait orientation, and I'm zoomed right in on a kind of a rocky crag, and that rocky crag has got some really nice shapes in it. It's got a little tree on the top, or near to the top, and then it's got some sort of golden grass growing up the side, and as the sun's dropping over there, and it will go behind the mountains in a matter of minutes, that's lighting up quite nicely. So I'm shooting a f10, focusing basically on the tree that's on the top of the rocky crag, and at the moment 1/5 of a second. I'm going to take a shot now, and then we'll see what happens as the light changes and see if it gets any better. So what I'm thinking this is going to be is probably a 8x10 or possibly even a square crop, and I'll probably underexpose it in post-processing, but at the moment I'm exposing it as far to the right on the histogram as I can without blowing any highlights. If you've seen my video on the histogram, you'll hopefully understand why, and if you haven't, then check it out. I'll put a link in the description. There are some hills and that behind the scene, so what I might actually do is I'm going to try a shot, and I'm going to take the aperture all the way down to f2.8, because I want to see what happens. At this point, I had intended to do a piece to camera about why I'd chosen to go from f10 to f2.8. However, I had to get the shot pretty quickly while the light was still on the scene, and then, well, I guess I just got a bit distracted, just chilling out and watching as the sun dropped behind the mountains, and I completely forgot to do that piece to camera. So I thought what I'd do is show you some video of the scene that distracted me while doing a bit of a voiceover explaining the choices that I made. At f10, I had enough depth of field available to get the whole scene sharp, but there are other factors apart from focus that can affect sharpness in an image, and on this occasion it was an environmental factor. Despite the lack of cloud, it was quite hazy that evening. It's actually not that uncommon here, especially at this time of year. A combination of heat, humidity and dust can often cause haziness, and in this case it meant that the more distant parts of the scene were actually quite soft, despite being kind of in focus, or at least it should have been acceptably sharp. I could have used a polarizer or the dehaze function in Lightroom to try to correct that, but as I wanted the rocky pinnacle to be the feature and to have it standing out in the image, I decided to actually exaggerate the effect and blur the background even more. And to do that, I went to a much shallower depth of field, which I was able to do by going to f2.8 on the 70-200 lens. And even though that pinnacle was quite a distance away, that large aperture let me achieve that and blur the background very nicely, allowing that pinnacle and the grasses and the trees to stand out even more. And here's the final result. Okay, so the sun's gone now behind the mountains, and obviously there's no clouds, so nothing's going to happen after sunset. There's nothing to light up. So I thought I'd start heading back and just try and bring this video to a close. So again, another day when the conditions really aren't great for landscape photography. But as I said, I'm out and I'm trying to get shots, and I'm hoping I've got one. That image that I've taken will rely heavily on that side lighting, which hopefully will pick out all of the golden tones in the grasses, and that will then lead up to the tree at the top. And if I didn't get a decent image, well, I tried. And you've got to try to get anything. If I stay at home, I definitely won't be getting an image. So the moral of the story is, even if the conditions aren't great, go out anyway. Just enjoy being outside and see what you can find. And there are always compositions that you can use. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, and if you haven't done already, then the subscribe link will come up at the end of the video, and there's one down below as well. Like, shares and comments, very helpful, very much appreciated. And I'll just finish off with my usual thank you very much for watching, and until the next video, bye.